So we're ending the time of Capricorn as I'm doing this recording, and not a lot has changed in my life per se, but things are starting to dial in, lock in, as they say, and I'm starting to realize certain things from years ago that are resurfacing and playing back in my life to where I'm starting to understand the principles a little bit deeper. And also, I turned 33 during the last Sagittarius season. So it's about that time for things to balance out and then for them to be thrown into the astral so my mind can perceive it so that I could understand where I'm at through all the levels. And I wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about the astral plane. Kind of like difficult for me to have a place to actually pinpoint and start, but I guess I'll just start with what's really on my mind. So, a lot of the understanding that I receive from other people's videos or commentary or understanding that they share is that the astral plane is a part of existence that you can go to when you're sleeping, which is a super simplified explanation of probably what they mean, but I kind of get the understanding that's what they're saying. And maybe it's my lack of understanding of what they're saying, or maybe I'm not looking deep enough into it. But I kind of wanted to specify that the astral plane, just like all other planes, isn't a separate plane of existence in another dimension separated from other things. The astral plane is, just like all other planes, intertwined into the third dimension that we're living in this waking world. When we go to sleep, our body is anchored into the waking world, but our consciousness is free on other planes of existence that are also intertwined with the third dimension, as above, so below. Let's see if I can clarify that a little bit more. A tree has roots, and the the height of the tree is oftentimes equal to approximately the depth of the roots. Now, you on the surface level, you can't see the roots. You can only see the base of the trunk of the tree. But the roots are still there. They're just sub-level. Just like if you were in the sky looking down at the tree, you could see the leaves, but you couldn't see the trunk or you couldn't see the roots. It's the same way with the planes of existence. From a certain perspective, you can't perceive a certain plane of existence. You have to situate yourself to be able to see a certain perspective of a plane. But when we go back to the tree, we know because of science that the tree trunk is connected sub-level to its roots, which is how it gets how it gets parts of its nourishment. We know that through science. We don't have to see the roots. We know they're there because science has taught us that. Well, when you go to the spiritual science, you know you have a mind when you're able to use your faculties to think something through. Now, you may not have high degree control of the mind, but you know you have a mind. But let's say you didn't know you had a mind and you had no thoughts. There is no way for you to perceive that you have a mind if you have no thoughts. Those thoughts are a perception inside the mind. If you don't know that the tree trunk has roots, you can't see the roots. It won't be possible unless you dig the tree up. And in order to see your mind and experience your mind, you have to use your thoughts to dig into the cavern of your mind in order to experience itself. Give me time. I'll get better at explaining things more and more I do this. But let's continue. The reason why I'm saying that is because on the earthly plane, on the third dimensional physical reality, we use science to test things to see what the outcome would be and if we can replicate the outcome. It's the same thing with spiritual science. Material science comes from spiritual science. That's how we're able to do the things we're able to do in this world because of spirituality. But the material science has a hard time understanding the spirituality because our minds, right? The thoughts in our minds haven't reached that totality of understanding its own thoughts in order to dig deeper with its thoughts into the mind. But with certain anchors or certain points of understanding, we can do that. And through time, the human consciousness has left clues and understandings through spiritual scriptures, experiences of people's lives, stories, myths, and all these certain lore, if you will, of the human consciousness as left throughout time for you to go out and gather, to go out and pick, and to understand what you can understand. And your understanding of those pieces of the puzzle adds to a higher collective of mental thoughts that generations from now, our highest thoughts will be their introductory thoughts. And then their thoughts will begin to expand and grow deeper until eventually we get to a generation where they can experience total mind. Now, back to the astral plane. The entry level into the astral plane is the emotions. And I am sure of this now because when I'm on the astral plane, there's a high sense of emotion. There's a slight sense of physicality, or what we'll call physicality, like a sensory touch. But mostly, overwhelmingly, it's an emotion that is tying me to that experience. And when we're going to sleep or going into a meditative state or going into a trance, our emotions is what's going to dictate our perception of what our thoughts are leading us to. So if we are angry and we go into a meditative state with anger, we're going to get that type of vibration back. If we go into meditative state, go to sleep, and go into a certain type of trance, being sad, you'll get that type of feedback. Now, Just because you go into a meditative state angry doesn't mean you're going to get angry things back. Because it's not what we put out that we get back. It's what we put out and what we attract back. So we can put out bad energy, but the intricacies of life will bring us good energy. Or it could be the opposite. You could put out good emotions, but the nuances and intricacies of life could bring back negative emotions or experiences. And that's where it starts to get muddy, because in order for us to understand what the feedback is, we have to understand our emotions from a mental level, as above, so below. If there's the physical body, then there's the emotional body, then there's the mental body. In which order are we looking at the perspective? If the perspective is we have a mental body, we have a physical body, and we have an emotional body, putting it into a hierarchical understanding for our logical, scientific, third-dimensional mind, how do you rank those? Do you rank the physicality being above and greater than the emotions, and the emotions greater than the mind? Is it the mind that's subservient to the emotions and the emotions are subservient to the body? Is it the body that reigns supreme and the mind follows the body and the emotions follow the mind? In which understanding and perception do you see it as? So in order to break that down and understand the logical hierarchy of that, we have to understand ourselves. Do we do things because of our body says we should do them? Do we do things because our emotions say that we should do them? Or do we do things because our mind says we should do them? Now, obviously, all three of those are correct, you know? So, what the body wants and desires and needs, is that more important than what your emotional body wants, desires, and needs? Is what the body needs more important than what the mind needs? Which has precedent? Which has the most strength to put you in the direction that you want to go? Now, you may say, well, it depends. And of course, it does. Because if we're underground and we're digging and we see the roots of the tree, we're eye level with the roots of the tree, but we cannot see the trunk, nor can we see the leaves. If we're in the sky and we're looking down at the tree, we can see the leaves, but we can't see the trunk nor the roots. It's your perception of it. So I'm not going to go through each one and be like, well, if this is the case, or if this is the case, or if this is the case. You can do that on your own. I'm going to fast forward a little bit and lay out a possible understanding. So the body needs, wants, and desires are of its own being, just like the emotional body and the mental body. What the body needs to survive and sustain is the needs. So obviously we need to eat, we need sustenance, right? And we need a certain type of exercise or the body will wither away. Now, the body has a time limit on it already. So the exercise is just prolonging or preserving or putting salt on the physical body to preserve it for longer. The emotional body has needs, wants, and desires, and we think of that through our personality of what we want and how we feel about things. So we feel that we want to be rich. We feel that we want to be powerful. Those are our emotions. Those are our desires within us. And those are the needs of the emotional body based on the perception of that personality or that ego. What the emotional body needs is understanding. While the physical body needs sustenance, so too does the emotional body. It needs sustenance. The sustenance of the physical form is in forms of food and liquids. The sustenance of the emotional body is understanding. The understanding is going to come from the mental body and observing the emotions. It's going to understand what that emotion is, or label that emotion, or logically put that aside and say this emotion is that. Now, it gets a little bit deeper with the emotional body because we're going into a more finer plane or a more in-depth plane, depending on which way you're looking at it. If you're looking at it from a physical form first, we're going into a finer plane. If you're looking at it from a spiritual perspective first, then we're going into a denser plane. It depends on which side of the pyramid you're coming from or going to. Depends, as above, so below. Perspective. When we start to understand through our mental body, our emotional body, we can pinpoint and say this emotion is happiness. That emotional state of happiness is going to have its highs and lows, just like all other emotions. Our duty and understanding of what we need to do to feel that way or not to feel that way is the sustenance that we pull from our mental plane so that we can understand what that emotion is. So when you're happy, you know you're happy because you're happy, because we're taught that within our physical environment that this is what happy is. When this happens, you're happy. So we equate what we've learned in our societal environment to situations that make us feel, and we label that feeling happiness. But this is not the true understanding of what happiness is, because at first glance, we're only taking what we were taught, which was the words and the meanings and the definitions of them, and then applying it to how we're feeling, or how we perceive we're feeling based on what the society has taught us in this situation to feel like. So in order to understand what happiness actually is, when you have that societal experience of happiness and you feel that emotion, you have to use your mind, you have to use the vibrations of your mind to go into that emotion and see where it's coming from. When you see where it's coming from, you can see what happiness actually is for you. For instance, you're happy that you got a dog. So when you get a new puppy and societal standards, you're happy because that's what you wanted and you got what you wanted. But if you go deeper into inside of you getting a puppy, making you happy, if you think about it, why would getting a puppy make you happy? Well, maybe because you've always wanted one, a desire. Or maybe because you're lonely and you wanted a companion, another type of desire. The further you go into the understanding of why you're feeling this way, you'll understand, oh, okay. Well, I'm happy I got this dog because I've always wanted one, and it gives me something to look after to make me feel accomplished each day. So, the understanding of that happiness is rooted in you wanting to be productive and you wanting to fulfill yourself. Now, that's a shallow example, but try to understand what I'm saying and apply it to other things. It may be very difficult at first, but just give it time and keep digging into your emotions using your mental vibrations. Now, with the mental body is very tricky because if you're coming down and going up, you're going into very fine etheric vibrations. But if you're going up, if you're coming from up and you're going down, you're going into the less dense, the less dense vibrations. Because spirituality is the finest, and the physicality is the most dense. Like I said, perception. Now, the same thing you do with your emotions and trying to understand it with your mental vibrations, you also have to do that with your own thoughts. Have you ever sat and contemplated, where do my thoughts come from? Where are they coming from? Why do I have them? If you contemplate that, I promise you, you will be amazed at how quickly you give up. Because it's almost impossible to figure out where your thoughts are coming from. So you're going to come to a conclusion pretty quickly that they're coming from outside of you. Something sending something to you and you're receiving it. That's going to be your first understanding of it, because where does it come from? It's coming from literally nowhere. It's almost impossible. It's infinitely impossible to understand where your thoughts are coming from. But there's a secret. As above, so below. If you could understand using your mental vibrations of why you feel a certain way, you can also reverse engineer that into why I'm getting these thoughts. Where are these thoughts coming from? So when you got the dog, you wanted the dog emotional desire, and you wanted to be productive. You want to feel productive, and feeling productive, you would feel that with the dog because you have to take care of it. Well, why do you want to feel productive? So now we've moved the question from the emotional body back to the mental body, and now we're going deeper into the mental vibrations of why we want to be more productive. Because we wanted a dog because we wanted it. It was just a desire. It was an emotional body desire that we wanted, and we fulfilled it. Bam. Okay. We can go deeper into that if we wanted to, but that's pretty much set. It's what we wanted. Personality, ego. Okay. But why do I want to feel more productive? Maybe something inside of you is saying you're not being productive enough. Something is drawing you to want a dog because you know you'll be able to handle that responsibility to be more productive. which will lead you to somewhere. The more you take care of a dog, the more responsible you become, the more responsibility you take on, the more understanding of your emotions that you'll need to understand what the dog is needing, because the dog has the same spiritual components that we do. It just is it's just defined differently. So once we understand our mental vibrations and we go into our mental vibrations, we can realize that our thoughts are inner dialogue with our own being on a higher level. It's like you being outside of your body, looking down at yourself, talking to yourself. Those are your thoughts. Now, here's where it start to refract. This is why they say on the mental plane it's illusion, because there are so many different reflections and refractions and curves and angles and spheres and sounds and colors and vibrations and darkness and light, and all these different components are being mixed up, and it's so much that your literal mind can't, your consciousness in your mind and your awareness of it can't perceive it in its totality because it's too much, which is why we have thoughts. It narrows it down. But once you get into your thought vibrations of why you're wanting something, and then you go deeper into that thought of that want, and you uncover yourself and your ego wants to be more productive and it's telling you to be more productive. Now we can go deeper inside of that. Why does my ego want me to be more productive? What in my mind would make my ego want to be more productive? So now you may get to a block and you're like, I don't know. So that block is what meditation is for, is what contemplation is for, and is what your dreams will tell you. Now, cycling it back, the physical and the emotional and the mental body are all one body with different vibrations. So if you were to fly into outer space, you have to go through certain spheres of pressure before you get into outer space. Those spheres of pressure can also be equated to the physical body, the emotional body, and the mental body, and then the spiritual body. Different degrees of spiritual pressure that you're going through to get to the other side. All of this to say, the understanding of the astral plane isn't only in your dreams. It's in everyday life. And when you're able to lock in and understand your emotions on a mental level, and then go into your emotions on that mental frequency and obtain those thoughts, and then go into those thoughts, it'll unwind ideas and concepts about you, the truer you, the you when no one else is around. And in that space is a very, very small space. Very, very small. But that space is the gateway to your soul. But before you can gain entrance into the gateway of your soul, you have to pass through the astral plane. So in your waking life, you're using your mind and your emotional and your physical body all at once. You're training your mind to understand your emotions. You're training your mind to understand itself. Once your mind understands your emotions and the mental plane on its own to a degree, you can start controlling your body. And you can start understanding the karma you're setting. Once you start understanding the karma you're setting, then you can start understanding the spheres of influence that you're going through. Once the spheres of influence that you're going through starts being perceived by you in the waking world, you're able to meditate on principles that are beyond your thoughts, meditating in silence, meditating in the darkness until the darkness becomes light, until you can see through your perception, not see through vision or sight, but through perception, which is an emotional trait. So you perceive with your mind, but the act of perception is an emotional thing, because perception is the feeling of the mind. Because like I said, you have your emotional body, you have your physical body, and you have your mental body. Well, if your physical body has an emotional mental body, don't you think your emotional body has a physical body, emotional body, and a mental body? Don't you think your mind has a physical body, emotional body, a mental body,